Welcome to one more edition of Politics Done Right. I'm here with Patrick Carolan, who is currently the Director of Catholic Outreach for Vote Common Good and former Franciscan Action Network Director, I believe. Is that right?
Executive Director.
Executive Director.
Yes, don't forget that.
But you know, he had to leave that because he wanted to get into politics to take care of business. And I'm here with his son, Delvon Carolan. Delvon, how are you doing today?
I'm doing good, man. How are you?
I am doing excellent. I interviewed Patrick. I interviewed you a few months ago, and it was a great interview. I learned a whole lot, and here we are again, especially in these times. First of all, Patrick, tell me a little bit about yourself.
So I'm the son of immigrants. My parents came over to America in 1950 from Ireland. They were dirt poor Irish Catholics. I grew up in a very poor Irish Catholic neighborhood in Connecticut that was in transition. So it started out as an Irish Catholic neighborhood and ended up as a predominantly Black neighborhood. And, went through school and kind of really thought I really understood racism because a lot of my friends were Black. When I got into college, I started doing union organizing. I became president of a large state employee union in Connecticut in the 80s and 90s. I gave all that up after a while, became a stay-at-home dad. My wife and I became foster parents. We took in a number of children, and then we ended up adopting Delvon and his sister Brianna. We took him in first as foster parents, and I think this was around, correct me if I'm wrong on this, I think it was around 2008 or 2009, Delvon, is that right? Do you remember?
I think it was earlier than that.
Okay.
Are you saying the adoption date or the day?
When you first came to live with us as foster children.
Oh man, you might be right.
You were 10, so
whatever the math that is.
Yeah. So it's around 2008. Delvon and Brianna came to live with us, and then a couple of years later, we adopted them. And we have two other children, two biological children. So I have two white children and two Black children. And one of the things I began to notice was having to parent my Black children a little differently than my white children. I never had to give the talk to my white children, but I had to give it to my Black children, although I did give it to my white children because of that. But I'll tell you a funny story about that in a minute, too. I went on to then move to D.C. and become the executive director of the Franciscan Action Network, which is a social justice organization, works on issues like immigration reform and climate justice and racism, things like that. While I was there, I founded the Global Catholic Climate Movement and the Faithful Democracy Coalition. And I did that up until I was till this January. And then in this January, I just felt that we need change. It's one thing to talk about changing policies and working to change policies, but we're never going to change policies until we change policy makers. So I had to move from a 501c3 to a 501c4 so I could really work to change policies.
And Vote Common Good, that is your answer to actually get the right people in office that are going to do the right things.
Well, it's, one of it, Vote Common Good's focus is reaching out to mostly white evangelical and white Catholics. If you look at the numbers, people will talk about how terrible it is that 81% of white evangelicals voted for Trump in 2016. Right now, the numbers are at about 70%. Well, Trump can't win the election if he only gets 70% of white evangelicals.
Right.
And it's the same thing in white Catholics. I think it was about 62% of white Catholics voted for Trump in 2016. And right now, the polls show that number to be at about 50%. He's not winning the election. You take a state like Michigan, which is a very Catholic state, Trump won by 9,000 votes. We can easily get 9,000 white Catholics to reconsider who they voted for and vote for Joe Biden. I mean, especially Joe Biden because he's white Catholic, and make a difference and change the election. So, we're kind of niche in that regard, that we're focusing. People ask us, well, why are you just focusing on white evangelicals and white Catholics? And, it's because nobody else is focusing on them. There's lots of people working with other groups.
Right.
Where we can make a difference by just getting 5 to 7% of those folks to switch.
That is important. A lot of people don't realize that you have to work all angles. It's not enough to work one angle. But anyway, Delvon, let's start with you. You're a foster kid with Patrick. What was it like to you, a Black kid just immersed in I can't say a white community because Patrick said he lived in a Black community, but with a white father?
Well, when we adopted Delvon and Brianna, it was mostly a white community at that point.
Oh, it was a white community.
Oh yeah, I grew up in a community that was more black than white, but this community we were living in was, it's racially mixed, but not it was not a black community.
So Delvon, what was it like? Was it sort of being immersed in that right away?
I guess it was initially I was more or less innocent to just being thrown into it. I just kind of took it as what it was. I'm going to go live with this family and they're a good family. So initially, I just, saw it for what it was, family. I don't think I initially saw too much color until I guess other people introduced it to me.
Look, that's a very important concept, Delvon. That is very important. You saw Patrick as my dad. This is a guy who is taking care of me. And not until people showed that difference did you have to look and say, oh my God, there's some difference between me and my dad, between me and my white brother and sister. Is that correct?
Yes, that's right. It took a while. People would ask me, why is your dad, white, and why is your mom white? And I guess I didn't really ask that question initially. I seen it as, like they were loving and it was a good place to be. And it was going to be my forever home,
know? No, let me tell you a funny story about that. So one day, Delvon and I were walking down the street, and I think he was probably 10 at the time. And this person that I knew was walking, who I knew from my church and stuff. And we talked at our church that we were adopting these two children. And so he came up to me and he said, "Oh, is this your son that you're adopting?" And I said, "Yeah, this is Delvon. We're in the process of adopting him." And when we walked away, Delvon turned to me and he said, "Don't tell people I'm adopted." And I said, "Well, okay, they're going to notice a difference. What do you want me to tell them?" And he said, "Just tell them that I'm your son." And so, from Delvon's perspective, I think that's how he saw it, was that I was his son. And, we don't need to go into a whole lot of other details.
But you know what is so interesting about that? Go ahead, Delvon.
Oh, no, I was just agreeing.
Oh, yeah. What is so interesting about that is, you hear all these things. I don't know if you saw my newsletter today, but my newsletter today had an issue where I said, kind of implied that all this stuff is learned. Racism is learned. All these isms are actually learned. And, I think Delvon is a microcosm of that in saying two things. Don't call me your adopted son. I'm your son, but son, they're going to see the difference and they're going to ask that question, son. So, Delvon, now, when did you kind of see that? I don't want to call it a problem, but yes, when did you see a problem arise in your life with this?
I guess it was mostly other people's problem,
I love that answer. I love that.
Because again, like I said, my family was my family. So I guess the first time I really initially seen it, and I wouldn't say that it was vicious in any way, but I think I was around 11 or 12 years old going shopping with my mom, and we're in line at at this clothing store, and it comes up to me, my mom, and the lady asked if we were together or not, and me being 12, I'm like, who else am I with?
So somebody else came and pointed out a difference to you. Now, go ahead.
The cashier had pointed it out, and it happened numerous times. Had it be shopping for clothes, or I would go grocery shopping with my mom every Sunday. So, I guess that really kind of brought it to the forefront for me.
Now, how did you feel about that then? Because you're only 12 years old and people are starting to inflict these types of thoughts in your head, things that in your innocence wasn't there before.
I think that I thought that I could still play that these are my parents.
Right.
At that time, I'm like, why not still, So I guess it wasn't until people weren't necessarily believing me that they were my parents as I got older.
Right.
As I got older and and I could actually be in a line by myself, or go out to eat by myself, than it was more of a are you really with this person, or
Now let me ask you something now. Culturally speaking, right? When you were in school with your friends, I imagine you had both black and white friends in school. Is that right?
So I went to a Catholic school that was mainly Caucasian. There was probably 4 to 3 black kids in my specific grade, and I was friends with the one only other male black kid. Yes.
Now, did you find that, because I imagine they had black parents, right?
Yes.
And did you find that there was any issues with the black kids per se?
How do you mean? Were there any issues with the black kids?
In other words, did you feel any different having white parents to your black friend who had black parents?
So initially, not initially. So again, because I believe that we were in a setting with a lot of Caucasians. That the kid at the time was just kind of he was used to it at that point. I don't think I really ran into any issues with other African Americans about my parents until I was older, junior high school, where my parents would come in for parent teacher conferences or something like that, and they're like, your parents are white.
I actually had an instance, and it didn't happen with Delvon, but it happened with his sister Brianna, where I was there for parent-teacher conference, and we were it was one of these things where you're waiting in line for your turn to go see the teacher, and the last parent went in, and I was waiting out in the hall to be called in, and then the teacher packed up all of her stuff and started leaving, and I said, "Excuse me, I'm Brianna's dad," and she said, "Oh, I didn't," and I could just, and she was very apologetic about it and everything, but she, didn't assume, or didn't even think that I could have been Brianna's dad.
Yeah, that is ironic, or well, not ironic, but that is interesting. Now, let me ask you this: right now the country is going through racial strife. I know how you see it, Patrick, because again, we've spoken a whole lot. I am always interested to see, how does it appear to you through your eyes, Delvon?
What exactly?
Well, let me give a specific answer. Right now, the black people feel that they are targeted by police officers. Through your eyes, do you see it that way as well?
Absolutely. And you can see it by the action as well. I don't think people would be out protesting 7 days out of the week for no reason.
Now, have you had any encounters yourself?
I have.
Explain.
The first time I've had encounters with the police, there's a 7-Eleven where I'm from, and it's in the central part of the small town that I'm from, and that's where the kids would go and hang out, grab sodas, and hang out. And most of my friends when I was growing up were white. So there was a afternoon where we were there, and it was 4 or 5 of my friends in the back of my friend's pickup truck, drinking Mountain Dews, hanging out, waiting to, make another move to another location. And a police officer pulled in, blocked in his truck, and had us all get out of the truck. And the short end of the story was that I had gotten a ticket out of my 5 friends. I was the only one who was.
You got a ticket for loitering or something, didn't you?
Yeah, I
remember I had to go to court with you.
Mm-hmm.
Well, now why did the others not get one? If you got one, is that?
I asked the officer, and he refused to answer me. So.
Did you have any other occurrences or?
With the police?
Yes.
I was waiting for one of my friends in front of his house, and this is probably 2 miles outside of our neighborhood, which I wouldn't say was only white. It was predominantly white, but there were families that were of an ethnic background around us. But we were about 2 miles away from my house, about 2:30 in the afternoon, and the dead of winter, waiting for a buddy to come out of his house who was getting ready. And so as we're waiting, the time's going by, and, it's 5-10 minutes. And I'm looking at my phone, and I look up, and there's a police cruiser coming straight at my vehicle, head on, full speed. And so the police officer slams on his brakes right before he hits the front of my car and just throws his hands in the air. And I'm really confused. I have no idea what's going on. And all I hear out of, the left-hand side of my ear is, put your hands in the fucking air. And
no.
Yes, sir. And I turn to the side, and there's a pistol through the crack of my window. So it's right in my eye when I turn. And then I see 7-8 cops all to the left of me, and then another 5 to the right of me.
You have got to be kidding me.
No, sir. So I stick my hands out the window, and, I pulled it up, and I stick my head out, and I'm looking around, and one of the police officers says my name. He goes, Delvon. I go, yes, yes, it's me. And then he goes, he's like this, and he goes, oh my God, and, drops his gun, and, grabs his chest, and he tells the other officers, he's like, I know him, I know his dad. And obviously the mood of it had, changed. Everyone put down their guns.
Wait, but first of all, why were they there? Did a neighbor call them or something?
Yeah, so they said that they had gotten a call that there were people sitting in the car waiting to break inside of somebody's house.
That is amazing. And they came out arms ablazing, 12 cops or 11 cops for you.
Mm-hmm.
Let me tell you why that is important.
If I'm not mistaken, Delvon, the cop who recognized you was a black cop, wasn't he?
No, it was.
It wasn't Larry. Okay.
It's Officer Carroll.
Okay.
Okay, but there are two things that I think we get out of this, right? Number one is the difference in policing that you got, but number two is that your dad just mentioned that one of the cops that were in the surrounds was actually a black cop as well, which just shows that this is an institutional issue with policing. Yes, black people get over police. Yes, black people get roughed up more, but it's not just by white police, it's by police, period.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yes, sir.
I also think that tell a story about what happened in Milford at the bike park that time.
Yeah, so I was in Milford, Connecticut, and I rode BMX, which is tricks on bikes.
I know it. I'm not that old.
There you go. And so what we commonly did was we would ride into surrounding towns and visit the skate parks and check out some of the street locations that we may have heard about, and or just pedal around and see what we can't find. But Milford was just one town over, so it was one of our regular riding spots. And I think they had a parade that day, and me and my friends were riding around, and we noticed that this kid was getting bullied physically by a group of other kids. And so we decided to intervene. And so when I stepped in to intervene, and stepped between the kid, the smaller kid and the bigger kid, and the bigger kid, started running at his mouth. And, I told him, hey, you can't pick on this kid. Obviously he doesn't want to fight you. He doesn't want to fight. Leave him alone, essentially. And the kid was, F you effing nigger. And, took a swing at me. And so we started tussling. And, we finally got pulled apart, and me and my friends went about our day and went to the skate park. And while I was at the skate park, probably after 10 or 15 minutes, one of my buddies from the same town came up and was like, hey, man, we heard that, these same kids that you got in an altercation with are on their way with more kids to this skate park. So, me and my friends took the hint and, started heading back, towards our side of town. So on our way back, three full cars worth of kids are, trying to run us off the road in their vehicles. As they're screaming, F you, nigger, and this and that, and so I'm trying to just pedal away and, just get to my side of town. But, I'm getting tired and I can't outrun a car on a bicycle. So eventually I was able to get inside of a convenience store and call the police. And the police showed up.
You call the police?
Yes, sir. Yep.
Okay.
Did the owner of the store call the police?
Yeah. Well,
yeah.
The owner of the store had called the police because I'm inside of his store with 4 of my friends with the bikes as well, and he wants to know what's going on. And so, I tell him what's really, I'm being chased. So, I believe more than one person called the police as well. But the police show up nonetheless, and are just, what are you doing here, kind of thing. What did you do to these kids? Kind of making it seem like me and my friends were the problem.
And you got the license plates numbers.
Yeah, I had gotten the license plates number I think 2 of the 3 cars.
Yeah.
And now I think by that point they had called you, right?
They called me, and so I had to come over, and I'm talking to the police officer, and they had the license plate numbers, and I said to him, "You have the license plate numbers. Have you called these in?" And he said, "I checked it. I know these families. They're good kids."
What?
And I said, so, we went home. Delvon and I took Delvon home, and then I had a friend on the police force, the Milford Police Force, who went to my church, and I think he was a lieutenant or a captain. I couldn't get through. I kept calling over there to file a complaint. I couldn't get through to anybody. And I finally talked to this guy, and he said, "Well, come in and bring your son in, and we'll talk about it." And I asked him, "I don't understand if this were 3 carloads of black kids chasing a white kid on a bicycle, you would have had 20 police cars out there. You would have been calling the police from the next town over. You would have surrounded these kids. You would have had them in handcuffs and in jail. But it's white kids, and you're telling me they're good kids. So there's, and it's my son's fault." And they were blaming the whole incident on my son. They said, "Well, your son started a fight up at the skate park." And I said, "Well, that's irrelevant. Whether he started a fight or not, he didn't, but it's irrelevant. These kids were chasing him, yelling racial epithets at him while he's on his bicycle. The store owner told you this. He told you what happened and what he saw. And your response is, these are good kids." So that's kind of, gives you that whole perspective of
it is amazing because I'm going through with what's going on in the country right now. I've been doing a whole lot of writing on this police brutality and what police are doing to people of color, minorities, etc. And I get a whole lot of pushback, including from folks like Candace Owen, saying things like, "Oh, it's not real," etc., etc., etc.
And I wouldn't pay any attention to what she says.
Exactly. Here we have a black kid with a white father, and he sees, and he's going through this, or has gone through this as well. Now, Delvon, I imagine you don't really, you don't make, having a dad like yours, I don't imagine that messes too much with your psyche, does it?
How do you mean?
That's dangerous territory to go into.
It's dangerous territory? What I mean is, in speaking to your dad, right, I get the image that he's really all in. He leans into all these particular issues, that he went up to the police department and was your advocate, that he's been your advocate in doing a whole lot of these racial issues that in general, I'll be blunt, a lot of good white people would actually be more silent on these issues. In other words, son, just don't go there again. Son, don't do that again. But instead, he was an advocate to try to change the system and say, hey, if it were X amount of white kids in a car, black kids in a car chasing you actually heard him say things like that.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. It challenges other white people so it's almost like you're looking in the mirror, and it's in being told this, it's important for him to do that, and
right.
And so like he sees that, he knows he has to do that, because if he doesn't do it, you know, obviously no one else is, you know, or there's a limited amount of people who are. And I think by him doing that, it makes everyone take a second look at themselves, because I know every time he's done it, you could tell that these people really didn't believe, in fact, that they were being discriminated. They didn't believe it until he had told them, and then they stepped back, you know, and looked at themselves, and like, who knows if they believe it now, but that second look is worth something.
And you know, and that's what I'm talking about, because it has to be your dad, right? It has to be a white guy who challenges others that say, no, this is what's really happening, because otherwise it is like my white allies. I look at them and I tell them many times, it is you who have to do this, because when I do it, it is, well, I am the, you know, I'm the black guy with their preconceived notions. So I mean,
you're the angry black guy pulling the race card.
There you go. Exactly. And that's why that's important of white allies, white advocates, and that's why I like your dad.
Yeah, I like him too. I'm gonna keep him around for a while.
Yeah, you can keep him around for a while.
Let me tell you another funny story about Delvon, and then I want to go into another story that happened. But you know, as you and I have talked in the past, I've gotten arrested a lot for nonviolent civil disobedience. And one of the times I got arrested, Delvon called me up and he said, "Dad, all those times you were giving me that talk about how to, you know, deal with the police, did you not pay attention to it yourself?"
All right.
So why did you Patrick, why didn't you pay attention, man? You're giving your son advice that you are not using?
That's right. You're telling me to do this so you don't get arrested, avoid this so you don't get arrested, and then you're going getting arrested. So
tell me your other story.
So this is what happened with Delvon at school, and I'll start it off, and then I'll let Delvon jump in because it's his story. But, you know, it's typical of, first of all, you know, when Delvon was in high school, I'm pretty sure the principal had my number first on the speed dial, because I spent a lot of time. I used to joke with Delvon and tell him I spent more time in high school when he was there than when I was in high school. So I got the call one Monday morning and saying, you know, your son's in trouble. He's going to be suspended. You need to come in. So I called Delvon. I said, you know, explain to me what happened here. And, you know, go in, we'll talk about it. And he said, well, you know, on Saturday, he was at the 7-Eleven that they hung out in, the same 7-Eleven. And one of their teachers pulled up, and he was there with a couple of his friends from the school, a couple of white kids. And one of his teachers pulled up. And they were, you know, they're seniors in high school. They're kind of giving the guy a little bit of a hard time, saying, oh, you live in the area. We know where you live. And, you know, joking around. And his three white friends actually started walking toward the teacher. Delvon stayed back. He actually did listen to me on stuff like that. So he stayed back and stayed sitting on the hood of his car while his three white friends went closer to him. So the teacher complained. So I go in, and we're sitting in this meeting. And it was Delvon and me, and I don't remember Delvon. There were about 10 other people there.
Yeah, it was the entire administrative staff.
Administration. It was a vice principal, the counselor, the teacher, the shop teacher, because it was a tech school, the shop teacher, 3 or 4 other people there. And we're sitting down, and the vice principal starts talking about how, you know, he understands this incident happened on a Saturday, but we expect our students to respect their teachers, you know, even on weekends, and this was inappropriate behavior. And I looked around the room and I said, okay, I understand that, and I try to teach my children to be respectful, absolutely, all the time. I just have one question for you. Where are the other kids and the other parents? And the vice principal said, well, what do you mean? And I said, he was with 3 of his friends who are white who go to this school. Where are they? And he turned to the teacher and he said, well, what about the other 3 kids? And the teacher said, I didn't feel threatened by them.
You have got to be kidding me.
No.
And Delvon, you didn't approach a teacher. The other 3 kids did.
Yeah, they had initially noticed him. I don't think I noticed him at all. And they were like, oh, there goes, you know, so-and-so teacher. You know, let's go say hi. And knowing my track record at that school, I did not go up to that teacher. I was like, I knew better. I was like, I'm gonna stay over here, guys, you know. And then, you know, like my dad said, they were giving him a hard time. Oh, you know, what you doing around here? We never seen you around here, so-and-so. And they started walking, and they're like, "Oh, what are you doing?" And I'm like, "Oh, he must, he must live around here, something of that sort." And and that was the comment in which got me in trouble, because they said that he took it as I was saying I know where he lives and like to watch out.
You have got, and you are the only one.
Well, yeah. So here's what happened after that. I turned to the vice principal and I said, okay, now we're going to have a different discussion. We're going to talk about racism. And he said, "You're not insinuating that this was racist, are you?" And I said, "I'm not insinuating anything. I'm flat out stating that this teacher is a racist and that you're a racist if you don't recognize that he's a racist." And if
you said that?
Yeah. And if we're not going to do anything about that here, then I'm going to go home and I'm going to come back with my lawyer. And I also, I'm very good at name dropping, and I knew the state attorney general at the time. And I said, and I'll call George Jepson up, who's a friend of mine, and I'll bring him in, or I'll get somebody from the attorney general's office to come in, and then we'll talk about it there. And it changed the whole conversation to an extent. It
needed to change the conversation.
But they did nothing to the teacher. I mean, here's what happened with the teacher went to Delvon's 3 friends and told his 3 friends that Delvon gave them up and they're going to get in trouble now.
The teacher did that?
Yeah. He told his 3 friends that, Delvon gave you guys up, so you're going to, your parents are probably going to have to come in.
Oh my! That should be another offense against that teacher.
And that teacher wasn't, and they tried to convince me that this teacher isn't racist, and there was nothing racist about that. That's just how he felt. So it's that, and I don't, the teacher probably didn't believe he was racist. It's that whole idea of like, what happened in Central Park a couple of weeks ago with that woman calling the police on the black man.
Exactly. That's
what the problem is. The problem's not necessarily, I mean, what happened to George Floyd is horrific. But that's a symptom of the problem. The George Floyds are the symptoms of the problem. The problem is how embedded racism is into our whole culture, and white people don't recognize that at all and don't acknowledge that. And until we do that, until that happens, we're never going to change our system. It's why I think the whole idea of defund the police is such an important concept, because, from when I hear that, what I hear is that now we're going to, just close down and not have any police officers, but we're going to reimagine how we do policing in this country and revision how we do policing. And that's transformative, and not just, solve this one little symptom here, pass a law that says you can't use a chokehold anymore, which is important, but that's not going to change much. We need to have a whole new vision of policing in this country. And that's what Defund the Police is all about.
And that is so important, because a lot of people ask the question, I ask the question all the time: how comes all of these murders by police, usually the person killed always look the same? People say, oh, well, police kill more whites than blacks. Yes, but let's look at conditions and in what process it happens.
Yes. Well, and it was like that video that you shared the other day about the black kid and the white kid both getting in, tussling with the police. And the black kid got shot in the back, and the white kid escaped in the police vehicle. And they never once threw his.
I want to tell you, Dr. Patrick Carolan, let me tell you, it took me quite a while to put those videos side by side and time them to show the tussle, and to show the escape, and to show the results of the cop. But
that was really good.
It is important that we see this, and I think having spoken to both you and Delvon is important, because it's a dynamic that people don't see, and that Delvon lived in a hybrid family is so important that one can see. I mean, you lived with him, so you know all there is to know about Delvon. Hey, you reared Delvon, and Delvon, above and beyond that, goes out into what I call the real world, and has to live through the real world. And had you not been the kind of parent that you are, he would have been in for the shock of his life.
Well, and also I think about this, and Delvon and I have talked about this. I wonder if I had not been a white person, would if Delvon's father was black and went into that meeting at that high school and made the same comment, it probably would have been taken a whole lot different and not taken as seriously.
Absolutely.
It would have been angry black man pulling the race car.
Yes.
Yeah. It would have been
been shrugged off that way, and then no one would have thought any more about it.
Well, look, folks, in closing, I have 2 questions. I always ask this question of my guests. What did I not ask you, Delvon, that you want America to hear?
He wants America to hear what a wonderful, awesome dad he has. No,
but you know what, Patrick? Patrick, I wasn't speaking to you, Patrick. I love you, brother, but I was speaking to Delvon.
I know.
There's still time for change.
Hey, you know what? There's time for change, but we need change now. I agree with you.
Yeah.
Patrick.
Yeah, it's not too late.
Patrick.
Yeah. So other than that, I have an awesome son in Delvon. I think it's that, and particularly for white people that are watching, that, you know, it's okay to say, I don't understand. It's good to acknowledge that you don't understand, What's not good is then to do nothing about it. And so once you realize that, yeah, I don't understand racism, I thought I did, but I don't, then it's incumbent upon you to read more about it, learn more about it, talk about it, listen to, you know, your stuff, your shows, and other people, and you know, talk to Black people, listen to Black people, find out how they feel about it. Not just, you know, your token Black friend and say, I'm not racist because look, I have these 2 Black friends, but really, you know, delve into that conversation and have a conversation with yourself about how you feel, your attitudes. What is that, you know, what are your attitudes? When you walk down the street and you see a group of young Black men standing on a corner, do you cross over to the other side of the street? Do you feel fear when you see that? Things like that you can then adjust. It's okay to do that. It's not okay to ignore it. Apathy is the worst sin you can commit, because ignoring it's never going to bring about change. We all have issues about race that we have to deal with. Let's deal with them together.
And with that, Patrick, I want to add one corollary, because I wrote a first-person piece a few days ago with my own prejudices. In this case, it's had to do with homosexuality. And I went ahead and spoke how I overcame my prejudice, first in the mind and then in the heart. And I think that's just a different way of expressing what you just said. We acknowledge that we're human, we have problems. Now let's just individually solve it on the inside, and then we'll have a better world.
Yeah, and if you read the book by Ibram Kendi, Act Up Against Racism, he does the exact same thing. He talks about his own prejudice and how he was able to overcome that. And so it's just something we have to do.
Patrick,
and then we have to turn the world over to people like Delvon to make it
absolutely.
A better world.
Patrick, Carolan, Delvon, Carolan, it's been my pleasure, and I mean my pleasure, having both of you on Politics Done Right. You've been both very informative. Thank you so kindly. I'm Egberto Willies, host of Politics Done Right, an independent news program. I post several news videos of interest every day. I ask you so kindly to subscribe to my channel, and please leave me some comments. Thank you very much.